Gonna see how get my old young lemon drop together. All right.
Joint so fresh, you gotta Shazam it.
Coming through loud and clear.
It's Power 102 Jam.
It's our perspective. When perception comes to truth, respecting you won't lose. Right or wrong is what you choose. Perspective. It's just the point of view, the odds and the outcome based on how you move. It's all perspective. When perception comes to truth, respecting you won't lose. Right or wrong is what you choose. Perspective. It's just the point of view, the odds and the outcome based on how you move. The odds and the outcome based on how you move.
From the Midwest to all around the world, broadcasting the best in hip-hop and R&B.
Right here.
24/7. Hits 107.3. The Beat.
So it ain't gonna have the same effect, but he say what? The odds and the outcome based on how you move. Not how they move, but how you move. Welcome to Perspective 217. It's your boy P.
And this your boy Kales.
And we back at it, man, on this nice, fine Thursday evening. It's July 8th.
Hey, it's been a couple of them, brother. It's been a couple of them. Good. Hey, good to see you, brother. Good to see you. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, man.
You know, I
Even though
done
I feel
talked
like
to
I'm
you.
short.
I done talked to you a gazillion times, but it's good to see your face, brother.
Indeed, man. Yeah. So it's a good, nice July 8th of 2021. We had a couple weeks off, right? You know, we had some trips, which I'm gonna hear about one of them. I know for sure.
Yeah.
And,
hey, shout out to J Rock. He said he got some more that hot connoisseur of them finer things apparel for us, man. So salute to that, bro. You know what I'm saying, J Rock. What's up, bro?
Indeed, and I need that because I got let me get my camera all jack. I need that because I got
Facts, we do.
It's summer, and all I got is a hoodie and some sweatpants. And
Facts.
trying to put that on right now, man, I lose about 12 pounds in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, men's and women's apparel, bro. Look out.
Get it. Man, so Kel, how your 2 weeks been?
2 weeks, man. 2 weeks. You know, as you know, we here over here, you know, on the ill side. You know, surprise Shorty Red, kind of with her late, but not too late. Secondary part of her birthday, man. We shot on out to New York City, you know, and got us some ambiance out in Manhattan. Strolled around and toured Times Square, Empire State Building, the Edge. You know, New York, man, is so big. It's just crazy. So we had a really good time, man. Stayed at a dope hotel, man, right in the thick of things, man, right there, Embassy Suites, man. We were able to walk to everywhere we wanted to go. Restaurants, bars, liquor stores. They had mobile weed trucks. It seemed like on every corner.
Not the weed that you try to get rid of.
No, not weave. I'm talking about weed, marijuana. You know, on every corner, portable stores, and they had actual retail stores too, man. And so we got to enjoy a lot of that, man, as well as that hurricane type weather that was coming from the southeast, man. We got that the entire time we were there. We got soaked, you know, we got drenched, but you know, it was New York, and we was living our best lives, man. So you know, we were able to see some sights, eat some good food, snap some pictures, enjoy Times Square, man. So that's really been the highlight, you know, the last couple of weeks, man. Besides that, man, work stuff and
right.
You know how it is, man. But I'm blessed, man. 10 toes down, man. Let's keep this thing rolling.
Indeed, man. Mine has been going pretty well. You know, I'm back to about where I was prior to the incident that young Terrell had Father's Day night, actually. Had to run up some stairs, and Lord knows I ain't supposed to be running up no stairs after a knee replacement, especially not within 2 months. I wasn't ready. He wasn't ready, right? You know what I mean? It was one of those situations, but you know, I would do it again if I had to, you know what I mean, for that type of situation. So but I'm recovering, man. Everything's going pretty well on the knee front. We've done a lot of traveling, man. Back and forth to Texas. We went to Kansas City this past weekend, then stopped in Wichita, and we just kind of running up and down the road, man. It's been a pretty good week, man. Pretty good weekend, and that's what it is on my end, man. So we're gonna jump right on into it because this hour go by fast, right? So we got a special guest with us, right? She's been with us before, like she's one of the original people that came on our show back when we was
in the
studio in Urbana.
Yes, the beginning days,
right? 3 years ago, right? She came on and blessed us with some good trauma information, and I actually looked back through the notes because I still had the questions that I asked, and I'm like, man, all those questions were still relevant.
Yeah.
Today, right? All of those and her responses would still be relevant for today. So we had to have her come back on and with all this stuff going on and bless us with some more information. I know she's gained more because a lot more has happened. So we're gonna go ahead and welcome to the show Miss Karen Sims.
Hi, welcome. It is such a pleasure to be here. So I'm looking forward, and this hour goes by fast. So
it does. Hey, Karen, remember, because I think Karen, when we had you on a couple of years, I think we were doing a 2-hour segment then. And it was and it went by like it felt like 20 minutes. So imagine how this hour is going to be with all this information and knowledge you're going to give us today.
No pressure.
Right. No pressure, right? We can't linger on this time. But so Karen, thank you for coming back on. For our listeners that have not had an opportunity to listen to that episode that you came on, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, who is Karen Sims?
So, right, Chandra Somerville's local person always tells me to make sure that I don't lead with like my resume, right? Like she wants, so I am, I run a local not-for-profit called the Trauma and Resiliency Initiative. And we are trying to help promote healing communities. What that means is we believe that, the key to sort of making a difference in both mental health and criminal justice and and community violence is by building and strengthening communities to be self-healing, to take care of their own, to be in control of their power and decision-making. And so we spend a lot of time trying to equip people in communities to help each other, to support each other. And then we also educate people who work with them. We educate stakeholders being people who fund or are concerned about them, to better respond to their needs. Because, right, we want to help people be better, but also we want to stop things from causing harm. So it's the both and we're always toggling that balance. And you probably, in this past, year and a half, our work has grown exponentially, like a lot, because with COVID really escalating and magnifying all of the inequities, the vulnerabilities, and the pain in our communities, we've just sort of been on overdrive doing that work.
Absolutely. Man.
that was a line, that little mini boulder right there, that we can start peeling layers off.
Yeah.
So we're gonna jump right on into it, Karen. So in your opinion, Jesus, in your opinion, and from your experience, how much do you think has COVID taken a toll on our communities?
So COVID. Right, has been so this is right. when you already have vulnerabilities because you don't have access to health care, or maybe you, because of how you're educated and socialized, just don't understand prevention, or maybe you have problems with like impulse control and decision making, or maybe your schools don't have the right technology and they're old and run down, or maybe, right, like take any issue that's a social issue. COVID just sort of put a big bullseye on any community that doesn't have the supports and resources, and made it really, really hard, right? So I mean, you take an issue, and in the middle of COVID, we had all of the George Floyd and the social unrest last year. And I think people who already felt powerless and marginalized and sometimes not cared for really felt not cared for, because the world slowed down. And then you could, like, it's one thing, right? They talk about like boiling frogs. It's one thing when you're in a bad situation all the time and you kind of normalize it and you're like, well, it is what it is. And then I think when COVID hit, things slowed down and you're like, you know, I'm feeling a pain here, right? I'm going to say one small thing. So a couple people know this about me, but I hurt my hand in COVID, but I had been so busy that I didn't realize like it was swollen and bruised. And I think COVID's like this. And one day I was sitting down between like Zoom meetings and I look at my finger and it is like bruised. Like I had clearly closed it in the door. I don't know if you like closed it in the car door, and it was like really, but I had been so busy that I didn't realize like it was purple and all that, you know, like needing to go to the doctor. And I think COVID was like that. Like normally we got pain, but we're so busy hustling. We don't know we're pain. And then COVID slowed us down and we're like, that looks like it could be an ER visit. Right. And that's what I think our communities have been dealing with.
Karen, I would like to do a follow-up question there. Do you think, I mean, you know, as our community deals with so much as it is on a daily basis, do you think with all the inequalities, the unfairness, you know, the lack of health insurance, you know, the lack of means of being able to get to our demographics, do you think COVID was kind of like the snapping of the stick to either A, wake up our community, or B, put us further back? What are you thinking?
Well, I think unfortunately, right, I talk about, but I think like the politics of this was that I think it was the snapping of the stick. I don't think that it was empowering. I mean, I am heartbroken literally every day about how many Black and brown people still aren't getting access to care. And so people get Tuskegee wrong, and you guys don't know this, but I started my work off in HIV and AIDS. And so I've been through 2 pandemics. That's right. As a 20-something, I started this work, and people will tell me, right, like they don't take COVID seriously or all of that stuff. And they'll throw Tuskegee in. And I was like, you don't understand Tuskegee, because what's happened when you don't get access to care, that's actually Tuskegee. Because Tuskegee was, right, like people were given syphilis and they let syphilis spread as a social experiment to see like what would happen if people let syphilis spread. So that means that everybody they were in contact with, their partners, whatever. Now you could have do things to protect yourself from syphilis. Like if you knew you had syphilis, you could use a condom, right? But people let it spread, right? That is what COVID is doing. And so people who buy into like myths and stereotypes and say, I'm going to let it wait its course or anything can happen. That is the social experiment to say like, how many people can we take out? How irresponsible. So yeah, they're letting you do your own thing, but they're letting you do your own thing, really trying to see, right? And then they're like, well, I mean, because we've had a public policy, this whole epidemic that's been like, if you take advantage of the resources, if you take care of yourself, you're going to be fine. But everybody who's sort of cavalier and laissez-faire, we're seeing what happens when you let it spread. And my fear and worry is that we, for one, don't realize, like, just like syphilis, right? Tuskegee, It has long-term effects, right? So we know a third of everybody who has COVID will have some long-term effects that could be neurological, neurobiological, mental health, because it is not like a respiratory disease, it is a vascular disease, and people miss that. So, right, men can have erectile problems. You could be regularly healthy with no symptoms and end up with a heart attack, regularly working out. People do not realize. And so folks who were already physically vulnerable, because Black people, unfortunately, and Black and brown people were already physically vulnerable, are more statistically likely to have these symptoms. Our kids are more likely, our bodies are more likely. And so we're not looking at just a virus that's happening now. We're looking at our communities being impacted by long-term health outcomes for possibly the next 20-something years.
Kale, I see a follow-up.
That's Tuskegee, right? Like, and I was like, we're getting it wrong, because if we took it right, like if we were like, we're going to take care of ours, imagine how different we would be.
You're muted. Still muted.
Live TV. So you kind of segmented into our next question, which was the long-lasting effects. But
Absolutely.
I think people don't really understand. Like even myself, some of the things you said, as far as, you know, the things that men can, I guess, some of the side effects or long-term effects can have, as far as, you know, heart attacks and the erectile dysfunction and some other things. Like, I don't think people really understand the depths of COVID, you know, because I'll be honest with you, here we are a year later, and I know quite a few people who are like, man, I'm not getting vaccinated, man. That's all a hoax and a joke. And I'm like, man, it's like hundreds and thousands of people like died.
Yeah.
You know, that like people are still getting affected today in 2021. And I don't really think I don't think politically there's enough information to dive into to really kind of what all this is, what this COVID is about. Yeah, it's a virus. Everybody's like, well, you know, I'll just wash my hands. I won't touch my face and I'll be all right. But I guess my question to you is, what are some of the things that you have learned or researched to let our viewers and listeners know that it's a little bit more serious than just, you know, you washing your hands and not touching your face a year later?
So, I mean, a lot of things. So one is that there's a lot of good information out there. So, right, Johns Hopkins, the World Health Organization, lots of people are there's access to good information. But, you know, in a world where people don't separate opinion from fact, right? So they consume, this is one of the things I would wish for our communities, particularly African-American communities, is media literacy, right? So like, all news ain't good news. And and there is facts like science, and then there are opinions, right? Like, and those two are not the same things. But again, it's a sign of poor schools, right? Because we haven't educated people to do critical thinking, because if it's entertaining, we think it's legit. Right. So part one. So there's good information out there. And if people got the science, they would understand that viruses change and mutate. So one of the things that you would learn is that every time a virus hits your body, it has an opportunity to change. And the more a virus has a chance to hit people's bodies, the more it will change and mutate. And the more it changes and mutates, the more adaptable and smart it is, because the virus is a living being and it wants to live. And so it is going to be smarter than your treatments, your prevention, whatever, because it wants to stay alive. And so people who are like, I'm just going to get it, make those of us who were vaccinated more likely for one day our vaccines won't even work. And we could get a virus that's so smart that there is no treatment for it. So those people who are like, I'm going to let it figure it out, don't get how viruses work, right? And that's why like the Delta strain is much more contagious. It's smarter. It spreads easier. It's getting kids. The first version of the virus didn't do that. So part one. Part two is like people miss the science, right? So the science about how viruses work is that We will have one understanding, like with COVID, we thought it was a respiratory virus. That's what people thought it was initially. And then they realized, like, this is from the science, right? Like, oh, they could go into a hospital room and find micro droplets across the room, even though people had vents and were all protected. And that's how they realized it was aerosolized. And so that meant that there were small particles that the virus could linger in the air and on surfaces, right? So once you learn that, you're like, oh, you could see what the flu virus looks like, and then you can see what COVID looks like, and it is different viruses. The second thing is, once it hits the body, right, you can see like it does something different to the body than the flu virus. So it generates a different immune response, and you can see that. So that's why I said it isn't like a respiratory virus. It's a vascular virus. It hits your vascular system, which is your blood flow system. It can embed in your brain. We don't know for how long, but COVID goes and hangs out in your brains. It's sort of like HIV, right? Like except for HIV is suppresses your immune system. Mm-hmm. COVID overstimulates your immune system. So, right, it creates too many they call it cytokine storms, right? It creates too much of a response, as opposed to HIV that like has your body attack helper and fighter cells, but it's smart and it's adaptable. And so I guess I would invite people who are like, to know that there's good information, to go to credible news sources, to stop listening to like Friends, Barbershop, right. Right? Like to do that. And the thing that I also wish, and I feel this way about birth control, we know how babies are born, so people can know how to make them not be born, right? Like you can protect yourself. Right. And this COVID is just the same way, right? Like it is really easy to protect yourself. It's an inconvenience, like using a condom. Hopefully that's appropriate for me to talk about, right? Mm-hmm. It's a little inconvenience, but think about all the benefits the condom gives you. Wearing a mask or social distancing or checking some stuff out is the same sort of practices. And if we could get one, right, like imagine how better we would be as a community. Because, just like we got syphilis that can't be treated, we got COVID that's out here going crazy. Right. Same sort of, like I take care of myself. I ask the right questions. I realize that there are practical things that I can do. And maybe it's a little inconvenience, but think about the long-term benefit.
Yes. So you there's so much. I mean, it's ridiculous that people. I know people that say, "Oh, well, I'm healthy, so even if I do get it, I'm gonna make it through it." But you don't know who all you're gonna affect. After the fact, which is what you just covered, kind of like that people, it may change in your body because it's finding a way to fight you, your body, your strong body per se, right? And then it get the next person. Now, if they did have that defense mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so. Yeah, absolutely. So, right. And the last thing I want to make sure, because people always say like, I'm healthy and I'm going to be fine. You can have, and again, this is not Karen, this is research. You could have absolutely no symptoms and still end up as a long hauler. That means that, again, that you still have long-term digestive, respiratory, you could have kidney failure. You can have a heart attack, even if you are asymptomatic. So a little bit of COVID, there's no such thing as a little bit of COVID. Right. There,
you got it or you don't.
Yeah, if you get it. And who wants to be the person who gambles on, I'm going to be the one who has depression for the next 9 months? Because again, a third of people who contract COVID, even with very mild symptoms, have long-term mental health symptoms. And we think that is part of what happens to the brain. So they're presenting with depression and anxiety. Even if you don't get the heart problems, who wants to have depression and anxiety?
Man, I don't. I know.
Right.
So you just went into our next, how do people move forward with their mental health now that the country is opening back up?
So I'm going to say two things to that. One is I always believe in resiliency, but I also think that we need to be careful around this concept called moral injury. So vets, law enforcement, lots of folks probably know about moral injury. So we can go through traumas, and then when we do things that we know go against our moral values, it actually messes us up. And I think some of us have been engaging in behavior, maybe not being careful. Imagine if you made your grandma sick, or your, whatever. Or if I think it's why not everybody's gone back into work, is that some people are like, I don't want to go and like work in an environment, take a lot of risk for like minimum-ish wage, right? Like it causes too much conflict where I have to deal with like, I have to go back, take care of my grandmama, or I have a baby or a child in my household. Is it worth the $13, $14 an hour, right? Like, I don't want to. So I think people got to get clear about what they believe and to really sort of figure out how to create lives that make sense. That means being right, having some integrity and honesty. And I wish we did a better job of supporting people in doing that, right? And not making people feel guilty. And taking control over what you can control, because you do not, I don't care what the government says. I don't care what the CDC recommends sometimes, right? Particularly if it doesn't make sense to you. If it does not make sense, like, for example, I'm going to take the mask policy. I'm just going to be Karen. But it does not make sense for example, I'm just going to be transparent. So the mask policy says, hey, you don't have to wear a mask. But if you know, and I will tell you, I have an auntie who was fully vaccinated, but she's in an area where the Delta variant is prevalent. And she and her granddaughter all got reinfected with COVID. So because you can contract COVID, they just means that you get a mild case. That's what they promise you. They don't say the vaccine means that you won't get any COVID.
Right.
So to think so if you know that you could still contract it, and we don't know what like a little COVID means, why not still protect yourself? You can control that. No one can make you and yours irresponsible, put you and yours at risk. Control what you can. And I think that that's good for our mental health, to feel empowered and equipped. And we all need people. We need social supports. We need social connections. There are all kinds of ways to do that with integrity. In some ways, I think if we had done COVID right, I'd be checking out, right? Like looking in with my friends, me and my friends, we would have some contracts around how we're going to be together and what we're going to do. And we'd talk, and I'd be like, hey, I'm traveling, blah, 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 but I'm going to be careful because when we hang out, I know we want to cook out, right? Like we would work out those kinds of things. If my kids are going to play someplace, I'm going to know a little bit about what, it's that repairing the village, that we could do all of that and still be safe. But it's that whole let's just do, they said we don't have to, so let's just act like we don't have to take care of ourselves and other people, that I think is going to mess up a lot of people. It's also irresponsible. So, and just to remind, right, my last little COVID plug, if people in your lives have had cancer and are on chemotherapy drugs, if they're on immunosuppressants because they got lupus or RA or any of those autoimmune disorders, even, some alopecias, right? Hair loss, it's an autoimmune disorder. So if they're getting treated for any of those things, we don't even know 100% if they've developed if they get vaccinated, we don't know if they could have an immune response. So we don't know.
Right.
And some people are not having any immune responses. So they're recommending, and not in the Midwest, but like on the East Coast, they're trying out like a third and a fourth and boosters. Right. So imagine how many people in our lives have lupus or have been treated for cancer, or who have any other those autoimmune disorders. All of those folks, if you MS, cannot necessarily, some people can't be vaccinated. And if they're vaccinated, they may not be fully protected from COVID. So just do the just do the right thing, right? Like look out for you and yours. And we didn't say this explicitly, but I'm hoping your audience realizes that Black people and brown people have disproportionately been affected by COVID.
Right.
So
Yes.
we recommend, we represent in most communities, anywhere between 10 or maybe 20% of the population. And we represent 50 to 60% of the COVID cases. That's why I said this is syphilis, this is Tuskegee, because it is running rampant. And even allies, like white people who say that they're with us, will say, because they kind of understand, they think COVID resistance is about like politics, and they think it's like right versus left. And they don't understand that there are so many Black and brown people, and they'll say, like, they'll use words like mass holes or whatever. And I was like, you don't understand. You're talking about my communities. Right, who have been resistant, and you're down for the cause, but then you're saying, well, if people don't get vaccinated, I think like it should just sort of be on them. And I was like, that should not be, like, if you are concerned about communities of color, if you're down for Black Lives Matter, then you're down for Black Lives Matter, and you're concerned about our response to COVID because we've been dying disproportionately.
I think as far and Karen, you always bring fantastic points, and I just think that just kind of society as a whole has just kind of, like you were saying earlier, have kind of compared the two between a common cold with COVID. Oh well, if I can survive that, then my immune system is strong enough to survive this, and that's just not facts. That's just not facts. And so people who are not in necessarily in our community, who have a different mindset, they're kind of on the wall about getting vaccinated. Now, to each his own, but like you said earlier, if my priority is to take care of me and mine, I don't understand what the pause is. Because if you're trying to be the overseer for you and your family, like, I mean, do what you need to do to take care of you and yours. Don't be on the fence and come out, on some type of political standpoint to try to say, hey, maybe I should, with this is my constitutional right, and this is because people are dying. I mean, that's just kind of what it is.
Right. Man, that's leading us into our next question, which is talking about trauma, right? There's different types of trauma, and we've been focusing so far on COVID, right? The trauma from COVID, but what are some of the other traumas like that we're being affected by, like gun violence?
Yeah.
What I mean? How do we get past COVID, the trauma that COVID has put on us, and the increased gun violence that we've had in every community, not just one or two, it's running rapid like COVID.
Yeah. So two things, right? So I want to talk about the trauma, but I heard a really interesting study, right, recently, that the increased, right, first of all, during COVID, gun sales grew exponentially. And there's some belief that part of the escalation in gun violence has to do with the availability, right? Because people's homes always get broken into, and people don't secure their guns. And, now we have guns circulating, and people buy multiple, particularly from different states. And so part of it is the increased availability of guns. And some of it is not rightful gun ownership, because when you wonder, why can't a 14-year-old have like technology to do school, but can find 3 guns that have semi-automatic weapon capacity? There's a method to the madness, and I want us to be curious about that.
Yes.
All right. That does not seem purely coincidental. I'm just saying. So there is some trauma around the availability of guns, and I want to separate sort of the mass shootings, which have escalated under this past year and a half, and then community violence, because both have been happening, right? So we are having both the go into the grocery store, incidents, but we also in our neighborhoods and our blocks are having all, 14, 15, 16, 20, 30, who are having conflicts, who are upsetness, for whatever reason, right? And for every incident, particularly in community violence that I've seen and experienced, they're like, 8, 10, 12, 14 people impacted by one incident of gun violence. And so people might think about the one person and maybe their mom or their family, and they don't think about the friends and the girlfriend and the best friend and the neighbor and the whatever. And we have neighborhoods that are just terrorized. And as long as people feel unsafe, they will feel like they need to carry, right? When you talk to young people, they say, I'd much rather be caught with the gun than without it, because because carrying, as long as people feel unsafe, they're going to carry, right? Like that's just the nature of the beast. And so promoting community health and healing and safety is a way to reduce gun violence, right? Like, so where people feel like I can walk around here and nobody's going to roll up on me and hurt me, right? Mm-hmm. Me and mine. So, and we know that trauma begets trauma, and particularly violent trauma is self-perpetuating because of that whole, I need to stay in flight mode just to keep myself protected. And observing things, creates trauma. You write, economic insecurity, feeling not protected and cared for creates trauma. And so I feel like in this moment, right, like that there are so many experiences of trauma that so many of our communities are going through. And the heartbreak is that, right, the heartbreak is twofold. One is we do not have the supports to deal with the crisis. So we've got, I think about like the technology infrastructure, like we, don't have enough helpers, don't have enough supporters, don't have enough safe spaces, don't have enough diversion, and we can't keep up with the pace of the victimization. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so untreated wounds, like any other illness, just get sicker. And so I don't know how we keep up. So lots of different types of trauma, events, experiences, and the effects. And I feel like, many, many people are experiencing a lot of pain right now.
You spoke about what really needs to happen as far as the care to try to decrease because trauma begets trauma, and the people who are committing these traumas have been traumatized at some point themselves. But people, communities, governments, any type of officials, they want that to happen. Mm-hmm. They want a light switch. I want my light switch turned on or turned off, right? And these type of traumas and continued traumas, because you hurt, I've been hurt, now I'm gonna hurt you, thinking it's gonna make me feel better, but it really doesn't. But then they're gonna hurt somebody else, and then they're gonna hurt somebody else, and they're gonna hurt somebody else. With this, with the treatment to trying to get a hold of, the young ones and treat the parents, the grandparents, and provide. When I was there, we were working on trying to give aid to the parents, the grandparents, all of the caregivers of the ones who were committing the violence and being the victims of the violence. Mm-hmm. But that is a hard hill to climb, because some people don't, for one, want to admit that they've been traumatized. For two, because there's a stigma with it. We talked about that in our first time you came on the show. Yeah. That stigma of being labeled that I've been traumatized, like it's a sickness, or you have an illness that people, you got the cooties. You know what I mean? I've been traumatized, so I got cooties. People ain't gonna want to touch me. How do we get past that and get to a point to where we can? And this is your opinion, right? This is your professional and life advice. How do we get past those stigmas and that to try to jumpstart it. I mean, because we've been trying. I mean, this is not like we haven't been trying physically, boots on the ground, trying to do this.
So, of course, I think about this every day, all day long. So one is I believe, and this is what I advocate, it doesn't matter what you call it. Like, you don't have to claim it in order for me to treat it, right? So that is part of the issue, is that we start where you are, work with where you are, and meet you where you are. So part one, because I also think, and I've been thinking about this, we had a neighborhood safety meeting recently, and there was somebody in the room who talked about how little we talk about substance abuse, right? And so, and she really like articulate around, hey, we need to do more about like addictions. And, part of like, even when we say somebody is numb or not responsive, frequently they're under the influence. And so what you're seeing does look non-responsive. It's why when they go to county for, a little bit and they clean up, then all of a sudden they're in tears and emotive and all that stuff. Cause it was always there, but when they were medicated, we couldn't see it. And then people punished them because we couldn't see it. Am I right? Yeah. So, but she said, but I also think when we have people who've gone into traditional treatment for addictions, to talk about how you got here is actually considered to like not be committed to your recovery, right? Because they would say, hey, you're not owning your stuff. So if you have communities that have been affected by systems who say you can't talk about why you are here or what hurt you, when the systems reinforce your silence about it and the labeling, and they say it's because there's some kind of character defect, not because there's some need, right? Part of it also is around educating people who do the work to help language it, because so often if you get caught up in the criminal justice system or the substance abuse system, people believe it's about you, about who you are, not about what happened to you. Right. And we got to do a better job of helping those people be curious about why you're seeing what you're seeing. Because imagine that whole response would start differently, right? From law enforcement on, if we realize like when people start cutting up that there is something going on there, it would be a different response. So part, and then, two things. Neighbors got to stop being afraid of each other. Because I always love it when people tell me, I can't say nothing to nobody's kids, blah, 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 blah. And then because then you meet people who are like, I talk to other people's kids all the time, right? So it's like, so you have convinced yourself that you can't say nothing, so you don't. That reinforces more crazy, right? So imagine, and it could be that you haven't talked to that mama or your neighbor. So yeah, you can't go talk to some stranger reckless. But if you know the community and you're reaching out, you can't say that's out of pocket or don't cuss in my, right? You can do that, but that's a relational model. So we got to get back to that. And then this is the political piece. This is the funding piece, because we always give crumbs at the prevention, and we spend a whole bunch of money on the other end that costs a whole bunch. And then we say, well, this should be on par with this. And we give this crumbs and we give this a whole bunch. And we're like, well, if this doesn't work with the 20 cent, but we give this $500,000, right? And then we're like, well, why isn't it giving us the same outcomes? Well, energy goes where money goes. And so if you believe that, and so I also think as Black and brown people who vote and pay taxes, we got to get better. We got to be as mobilized as everybody else to go to meetings and say, we want our stuff too, because those folks will show up about a pipe, about a street light, a infrastructure, a viaduct or whatever. Yeah. And we will let all kinds of things crazy happen. And we'll like get upset about something really tiny that we'll show up for. And what we need to be asking for, like real money, we're silent about, and we got to get mobilized. I talked to somebody recently. I'm hopefully not going to say anything, right? Who's been meeting around like American Rescue funding for COVID relief. And I was like, you do realize that there's another group in town having fundraisers to do their mobilization while we're sort of brainstorming touchy-feely options. And there's a whole bunch of other groups like raising money, and they can do campaigns and they can do advocacy, and they're having barbecue and they are advertising. I listen to Christian music. They are advertising deeply to get their stuff going. And I was like, who do you think is going to win this battle? Our sort of touchy-feely, like over here, are those people who were like mobilized.
Yeah.
Mobilization.
Right. They are mobilized. I was like, I don't even think we're even aware of how mobilized they are.
That's just crazy. Kel, I see the follow-up question in your eyes.
Man, it's just so much to try to unpackage, man.
Right.
You know, because, you know, all three of us here, you know, in some form of fashion, man, you know, we have been on those scenes or talked to those people who have been victimized or you know, traumatized or living or dealing in crisis, and trying to come up with a reasonable solution.
Right.
You know, whether it's the grand scheme of trying to do a surgery to repair whatever's going on in their life, which is almost impossible, to basically being kind of downgraded to putting a Band-Aid over a gunshot wound. You know, we kind of say that quite a bit here on The Perspective, because the resolutions are slim, you know, when it comes to some of these topics, especially when it comes to, you know, the trauma and you know, from the youth all the way to the adults. And my thing is, you know, now that here we are a year past with this COVID, and people have been kind of having this cabin fever, right, where they've been in their house, they really haven't been going anywhere to protect themselves, and now, you know, the government is saying, hey, you know what, everything is fine. You know, if you taking these particular steps and procedures, then yes, you can go out there in the world and continue to live your life. Not so much as you used to do it normally, but just a little tweak.
Right.
And then you have, you know, that segment of people who are just like, they're totally confused. And then you've got those segment of people who are completely traumatized. You know, they're depressed, they have anxiety, you know, they're unemployed, you know, they're about to lose their house. You know, you've got that segment of people, and that's a pretty large amount. And they're seeing some people move a certain way where, you know, either they've made it through the storm, so to speak, and they've kind of gotten back to the norm, but they've seen themselves continuing to fall back. And I think they just kind of, that cabin fever is kicked in where they're just, it's not even survival mode now. It's just a struggle mode. You know, like how do they comprehend what's going on? Because, you know, if you are fortunate enough to get unemployment, you know, that's great. I think just here recently, in the last week or two, I think the eviction notices have been lifted. Mm-hmm. So now, you know, these apartment complexes and mortgage companies are proceeding forward with evicting people. So, you know, that's going to be another level of trauma and anxiety and depression and everything else on top of everything that we spoke about. So I don't know, man. It's you know, it was already tough as nails, you know, pre-COVID.
Right.
Now this thing, man, is just, I don't know. I don't know, Karen.
I hear your despair. I want to be hope-filled, right? So I want to say something. So if you are somebody who's out there in despair and feeling hopeless, there are resources that are there more than ever. So reach out. And if you need help learning how to navigate those resources, there are people who can help with that. And that whole, like, we don't ask for help, we don't reach out, we know not blah, blah, blah. we got to get over that because help is there. And don't wait. And this is, do not wait for the house to burn down before you call, right? Like when you start seeing the fire, reach out, because you're right. Like if you create a crisis and wait for it, bottom will fall out. But if you know, like in this moment that you didn't pay rent for the last 5 or 6 months, resources are available. This is a unique opportunity. So call somebody. And if you don't know, don't take no for an answer. Keep asking.
Yeah.
And so part of that. So I want to say that explicitly. The second thing is that if you realize that you have felt hopeless and helpless for a long time, one of the other, if more than just the financial support, all of our insurance policies allow for mental health services. So there's no excuse. And now that Medicaid in most places has been expanded in some capacity, you have lots of provider options, not just a few. So it's not like if you're in Champaign, you don't have to just go to Rosecrance. You have some options. So know that. And then there are online places that offer free and a sliding scale and available mental health services. So there is, like, if you reach out, someone will answer, but you have to, closed mouth don't get fed. So you got to reach out. The other hope-filled place that I want to offer is that, and around insurance, if you were somebody who's sort of working class, on the bubble, not sure, maybe a solopreneur, entrepreneur, didn't invest in insurance. Now with the expanded, because of the part of the American Rescue Plan, expanded funding for insurance options so more people can get insurance covered. Do not wait again for your fire to happen. You can get affordable insurance. So apply, work from every state, every city has people who are funded to help you navigate that, to figure out what's the best insurance plan for you and your family. So do that. And if you're unemployed, this is the perfect time to get free insurance, and it'll be free until you, right? Like, go do that. And then last but not least, we all need each other. And I think culturally and ethnically and a whole bunch of things, we have not gotten in the habit of telling the truth about our needs and wants, nor have we been intentional about staying connected. So if I see something, I should say something. If I'm concerned about you, if I know you're over there struggling with your kids and your family, it is wrong for me not to say, can I help you?
Right.
What do you need? And I think we need to do a much better job of leaning in. A lot of times, right, we get focused on youth. And I know that we have 40, 50, 60-year-olders who are singled and divorced or lost a job or have health complications. And we are looking out for our folks who are most vulnerable. And those sometimes are folks who are in that 40, 50, kids don't live in the area or whatever. We need to look out for them better. And I actually feel like, that this is what originally, I've been secular because I talked about condoms, but this is what the church was designed for at its core, right? Like,
right.
People think a lot of things about, but the original part of the church was to take care of the poor, the orphan, the elderly, the disabled. And I think we also need to get a better job of demanding those things from where we put our investments. We need, because those buildings are in our communities and they need to be at the fore of our health, healing, and recovery. And a community's sickness, right, like, is a reflection of how lack of care it is getting. And if there are 10 churches on my block and my community is having 10 incidents of gun violence a week, I indict those congregations for not giving the care my community needs. Because if they were doing what needs to be done, some of this just couldn't happen.
Yeah.
And it's more than just praying it away. There are concrete services and missions and opportunities and taking care of things that are just not being taken care of, that's an indictment on those neighborhoods.
Shoes on the ground.
right? Like,
I
because
always say,
and
boots on
don't
the
tell
ground,
me,
but
right?
that's
Don't
common.
drive into a neighborhood that is having challenges and say, I'm afraid to talk to the youth, and right, because there'll be men at those churches who'll be like, I don't want to go over there and talk to those guys because they're like, they cuss and use drugs. Well, that's actually where the
Exactly
church
where you
is.
need to
That's
be.
where your work is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That should be ground zero.
Right? That's ground zero. And if you ain't doing that, then what are we giving you money
Then
for?
what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's right.
Man, look,
We need to
Karen,
hijack all of those buildings, right?
I know
Because
that's
we
right.
have community spaces. They should be community spaces if they're not going to do ministry.
you done took us back to church. And the Lord say, amen. So the next, Kel, did you have the next one?
I don't know where we at here, man. We had so much to unpack this here.
Well, okay. So let's talk a little bit about how different people respond differently to trauma and treatment.
Yeah. So I saw that question. And so, because we're all different, so it's just like for each of us, right? Each one of us, because we're a combination of genes and triggers, right? So everything impacts us differently. Also, the amount of resources I have at any given time makes a difference. So the more friends, the more physical opportunities, the more recreation, the weller I am mentally, spiritually, financially, emotionally, the better when bad things happen, I can weather the storm. I know sometimes it's tempting to think like, oh, I'm just going to work on like my physical wellness and I'll get to my financial wellness later. It all works together. And so the more good stuff I have in my life, the easier it is to navigate when adversity happens, because adversity will happen. I just got to be equipped for the journey. So that's part one. And then I think a lot of people don't get, right, a larger conversation, but trauma specific treatment, if I am experiencing trauma and need treatment, it isn't traditional talk therapy. It is a combination of both a wellness plan, because some of our traumas aren't cognitive. So it's not like I can talk my way out of feeling better. Sometimes I actually have to do things. So I should be sleeping well. I should be eating well. I should be doing some exercise on a regular. I need friends and support. And then I also need, so trauma specific therapies, if just FYI, if you're like trying to figure out if you're getting a trauma specific therapy, it should be, generally it's time bound. So it generally doesn't last forever. It generally has a focus. It generally has some skill building. So it's teaching you some things that are practical. If I am a kid, my caregivers have to be a part of my treatment, because they're a part of my recovery and they also frequently have their own traumas. So they got to be equipped to support me. If I'm an adult and I have friends or a partner, my partner needs to be with me, because if not, my partner's probably going to reactivate my trauma. Right. And so if they're not a part of my healing, we just going to keep doing the dance and I'm going to be triggered all over together. So generally it teaches some sort of mind, how to calm your mind skills, in addition to responding to skills. And there should be a lot of education around like what to expect and what to do. And then there's always a physical piece. So if you're not getting that, and sometimes it might work on the unconscious. So I'm going to use a buzzword. There's something called EMDR, and there are other experiences that don't like require you to think through, but they're designed to help heal your brain, because when trauma gets dislocated in your brain, the memories are fragmented, and sometimes you need to get a coherent piece of the memory. And that's not me talking about it. That is you working on the unconscious, because actually sometimes the more I tell my story, the more I actually embed the story into my brain, and the harder it can be to treat it. Because if I tell it over and over and over again, and the more I can make it deeper. The last thing to mention is that we used to think that the help was sort of like support groups and those kinds of things. And now we know that sometimes like being around people where you're listening to yucky stories all over again can actually make your traumas more pronounced, make you more vulnerable for PTSD. because your brain can't we're empathetic beings. And so my brain can't separate your trauma from my trauma. So the more I talk to you about my stuff, the more you feel my stuff, and your brain can't separate it. So the more pain you might feel. And then the harder it is for you to get better. So trauma-specific treatments look and feel differently. Most people don't. So just because somebody puts on their website that they do trauma, you may not be getting it. And so to be asking for those specific things.
Karen, do you feel that people here in 2021 are more inclined to seek help than they were, let's say 5-6 years ago? I mean, I know with COVID's kind of, opened another floodgate, but especially in our communities, we've always been under the, I can self-diagnose myself and I'll just tuck it away, under another layer. But do you think that people's mentality nowadays are more inclined to seeking help compared to maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago?
So that's a great question. So in some ways, yes, but I think there's a class piece around it. So I think more middle classy you are, the more it's gotten normalized. So you've got more public officials and, actresses and actors and athletes sort of talking about mental health, that's sort of normalizing it. But I think on the ground folks still have a lot of stigma around it. And again, I think because most of the time they see their mental health needs as a character flaw.
Right.
And they see as something inherently wrong with them. And they've been, since kiddos, been told that there's something wrong with them, not that that it's fixable or that it's treatable or or that it could be better. Right. So if I tell you you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, or you're not going to amount to something, or you're crazy, or any of those labels that we put, then of course, by the time you're 19, 20, you don't think like this is changeable. You think, well, I'm bad.
This is who I am. Yeah.
This is who I am. And so I think that we haven't created a lot of room. And so part one. So I think class wise, more and more people are open. Not enough. The other thing, longer conversation. I don't think everybody needs therapy, so I say that as a therapist. Most people get better on their own with the right supports. I think we need to understand wellness. And if more people had wellness in their lives, they wouldn't need therapy, because sometimes people are going to therapy to fix things that aren't going to be fixed through a conversation. That really it's about getting my life in order that I need, right? Like I could go talk about money all day long, but if I am financially constantly insecure, therapy ain't gonna fix that, right? Like, because that's a legit, so I need to be working with mentors and coaches. Black men, particularly Black men of color, need a village. They need vulnerability. They need accountability. They need discipline and structure. They need rules. So that's not a therapist. That's a container. That's a village. That's a network. That's why you join, and how do we go back and repair those systems? Because we keep looking for programs and those kinds of things to do what the village used to do. So we can't recreate some healing just needs to happen through neighbors, through mentors, through allies, through male figures who are like those father figures, right? We just got to do some stuff that we know that works and stop adopting things that, again, people have professionalized our healing, and we need to take it back because professionalizing some of it just ain't gonna work.
Yeah. So we've definitely reached our time, and see, it is, we really need special edition episodes for you, Karen, because or have multiple segments. Like we're going to talk about this one time, then this next time. Short recap. COVID's going to be long lasting and affecting, right? It's going to affect us. And when I say us, I'm talking about all of us.
And it hasn't left. It hasn't gone anywhere.
It's not gone, right? but what it's already done is going to affect us for a very, very long time. Those who are not living in the bullet-ridden neighborhoods, right? You know, they just see it on TV. They were still affected by COVID, right? You know what I mean? They were stuck in the house. They were having to make decisions on whether they visit family or not. You know, it beat a lot of people up. There's going to be a lot of trauma from that. You know, I'm fearful that trauma, some of the trauma is just been exposed, not necessarily new. Right. So that exposure, you know, it's kind of like pouring salt on an open wound, right? You're going to react.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I'm a little concerned about. Our gun violent piece, man, I think we need those groups like we was, you know, I don't know what y'all doing now, right? You know what I mean? Because I'm not there anymore, right? But it was, we were making traction, and then COVID hit, right? You know, because COVID hit, then I left, right? So, but we were getting traction. We were going out and having people coming in, and people were actually speaking up about things and making it okay to talk about the situations. You know, talk to the police. Give the police the information that they need, and quit quit. You know, on the street code mess. You know what I mean, man? I ain't no snitch. You ain't snitching when they killed somebody next to you. You snitching when you did the crime with them, and then you go tell on them. So you be like, hey, they did that, right? Yeah, I wasn't there. Well, I was there, but I wasn't there, right? You know what I mean? That's snitching, right? You know what I mean? We need help, man. One thing that we didn't talk about, but we kind of talked about it, but we didn't talk about it specifically, is law enforcement needing to be okay with saying that I've been traumatized. Because there is so many that have been traumatized through all of the situations. COVID, the gun violence, people not liking your profession, which meaning they don't like you because they're making it personal versus making it just overall blanket. They don't like the system, right? They're making it personal now, right? And so they're targeting law enforcement officers for a decision they made to try to help you as the community. You know, they only have so much they can do within the system, and that is traumatizing.
Oh yeah.
And imagine all the trauma that officers inherit on these crime scenes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, or the people that they come in contact with, because if they're showing up to your house to talk about a domestic or a fight or a shooting or whatever, they are being exposed to that.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, even though they might just be writing it down on a card or something, they're inheriting that because now they're taking the onus to try to go and resolve that. So it doesn't just go away because you tell that person that, or especially, you know, when you respond to a scene and see, you know, a gunshot victim or fatality car accident, or or there's so many multiple things too. So
baby injured, man. I mean, all those things traumatize you, and I can speak for myself that a lot of life has been traumatizing. I had a great life, you know what I mean? I'm not dead yet, but so far I've had a great life, but I've had some things that have traumatized me, right? And I would try to compartmentalize it and box it up, and I would have leakage, right? You know what I mean? I thought I had it secured, but I'd have leakage, just like putting liquid in a paper box. You know what I mean? Yeah, the liquid's in there for a little bit, but it's going to start leaking out.
Absolutely.
You know, and it would leak out, and I didn't understand why I was responding the way I was. And you hurt the ones
at home and the community,
the ones closest to you, the ones that catch it, right? Because you could be professional at work, but when you get home, you know what I mean, you being a butt.
Passing the buck.
Yeah, you being a butt, right? And so that is when I finally got to the point to where I'm like, man, I'm not okay. My world changed.
Yeah.
I thought I was good, right? But my world changed. And this is me personally, and I know several, and I, I don't want to point at people, but I know several officers that are doing that same thing, trying to compartmentalize, and they're broken inside.
Yeah.
EMS, nurses, fire.
Yeah.
I brought up the police, but it's all the ones who are on the front line and have to deal with this stuff firsthand. Karen, so Kel, I'll let you finish. Karen, so you want to tell us a little bit about the website down at the bottom of the screen?
So if you want to know more about the trauma and resiliency, the work that we do, we have workshops, we have groups, we are always looking for volunteers. Find us at the Trauma and Resiliency Initiative. I'm going to say something little pitchy, but right now our local community violence response work in Champaign is not funded. I'm actually personally supporting it with a board member. And so, we're always, every $25 makes a difference. We use it for our survivor support. That's helping people, find resources, housing, clothes, comfort and care, from blankets to coloring books, to getting people stuff at the hospital. We really try to do that. So every dollar is used to help survivors. So we're good stewards of your resources. So
right. That's what's up. That's what's up. Kel, you want to take us home, bro?
No, sir. I'm not gonna follow behind Karen's footsteps, man. I'm just very appreciative that she's here to, bring some more light like she always does, man, because
absolutely.
We talk about trauma and depression and anxiety here on our show. We've been doing it for years, man. And just to have her come and bless us here with her professional and her life experiences, man, is worthwhile. To get that out to the viewers and listeners, I mean, that's gold.
Absolutely. Well, it is always a pleasure. It went by fast.
Always does.
It went by fast. It was great. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, Karen, we want to thank you again for coming on. Just like Kel said,
we're gonna have you back again. So get prepared.
Not in 3 years, hopefully.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot sooner than a year.
Yeah, it'll be within 3 years, right? So for all of the ones who are listening, the website is www.traumaresilience.org. Not ink like the ink in your pen, ink like incorporated, the short incorporated. So www.traumaresilience.org. Check Karen out. If she got a lot of resources and a lot of information for you. It might not be financial resources because boy, funding is tight around these parts. But she needs the resources. She needs the financial resources. The community needs the financial resources, and she's literally boots on the ground. Really it's high heels on the ground because I ain't never seen her in boots. But you know what I mean, right? So for everybody out there listening and watching, thank you for joining The Perspective one more time. We'll be back at you next week, Lord willing. And until then, we're out.
Thank you.
Thank you.